The wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and the promise of snow. In the quiet town of Maplewood, nestled in the heart of Vermont, a two-story colonial house stood at the end of a winding lane. Its white facade and dark green shutters gleamed under the pale winter sun, a picture-perfect home that hid a story far from perfect. This is where our tale begins, a story of love, betrayal, and the heavy burden of secrets. 5 years ago, Sofia Martinez arrived in Maplewood from the Philippines, clutching a suitcase and a dream for a better life. Back home, her family struggled to make ends meet, and when the opportunity to work as a nanny in the United States came knocking, she grabbed it with both hands. The job was with the Reynolds family, a young, seemingly perfect couple with a 5-year-old daughter named Emma. Sofia still remembered her first day at the Reynolds home. The crunch of autumn leaves beneath her shoes, the crisp air biting at her cheeks, and the imposing yet beautiful house that stood before her. It was the kind of home you'd see in a magazine, warm and inviting on the outside. But Sofia would soon learn that not everything is as it seems. The Reynolds were a picture of success. Eleanor, the wife, was a high-powered attorney with a sharp tongue and an even sharper wardrobe. She was always impeccably dressed, her auburn hair pulled back into a sleek bun, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors with authority. Her husband, Daniel, was the opposite, a laid-back software developer who worked from home. With his sandy blonde hair, easy smile, and a knack for making people feel at ease, he was the kind of man who could charm anyone with a single glance. And then there was Emma, their bright-eyed, curly-haired daughter who quickly became the center of Sofia's world. The first few weeks were uneventful. Sofia settled into her routine, waking Emma up, preparing her meals, taking her to the park, and tucking her into bed at night. Eleanor was often gone, leaving early for work and returning late, while Daniel spent most of his time in his home office, emerging only for coffee or the occasional chat. Sofia noticed the cracks in their marriage early on, the strained silences, the clipped conversations, the way they seemed to orbit each other without ever truly connecting. It was a Friday evening when everything changed. Eleanor had called to say she'd be working late, and Sofia had just finished putting Emma to bed. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the calm before a storm. Sofia was folding laundry in the living room when Daniel appeared in the doorway, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Long day?" he asked, his voice soft but carrying a weight that made Sofia's heart skip a beat. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the laundry. "You could say that." He sat on the couch, setting his glass on the coffee table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the dryer in the background. "You're always working," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. "It's part of the job," Sofia replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "No, it's more than that," he said, his tone softer now. "You're good at what you do. Emma adores you." Sofia felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. "She's a sweet girl." "You're good with her," Daniel continued, his gaze fixed on her. "Better than I am sometimes." Sofia looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time that evening. "That's not true." "You're a great dad." Daniel laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Eleanor doesn't think so." The tension in the room was palpable, and Sofia could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. She didn't know how to respond, so she stayed silent, her hands gripping the fabric of Emma's shirt as she folded it. "Sofia," Daniel said after a pause, his voice low and hesitant, "can I be honest with you?" She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "Of course." He shifted on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I don't know how to say this without sounding wrong, but you're the only person in this house who makes me feel seen." Sofia's breath hitched, and she looked away, her mind racing. "Daniel, I know it's not fair to you," he interrupted, his voice tinged with desperation. "But I can't help how I feel." Before Sofia could respond, he stood and closed the distance between them. He stopped just inches away, his gaze searching hers. "Tell me to stop, Sophia, and I will." She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her heart screamed at her to pull away, to set boundaries, to protect the fragile line they were about to cross. But her body betrayed her. When his hand brushed against her cheek, she leaned into his touch without thinking. "Daniel," she whispered, barely able to hear her own voice. And then he kissed her. The kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent. His hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer, and she let him. All the unspoken tension between them erupted in that moment, and it was impossible to deny the pull she felt toward him. But as the night wore on, the weight of their actions began to settle in the corners of Sophia's mind, nagging at her even as she lay beside him in the dark. She woke before dawn, the first rays of sunlight peeking through the blinds. Daniel was still asleep, his arm draped loosely over her waist. For a moment, she allowed herself to stay there, savoring the warmth of his touch. But the reality of what they had done came crashing down like a tidal wave. Carefully, she slipped out of bed and gathered her clothes, dressing quickly and quietly. Her hands shook as she smoothed her hair, avoiding the mirror because she couldn't bear to look at herself. She felt like a stranger in her own skin, a heavy pit of guilt settling in her stomach. That day, Sophia avoided Daniel as much as possible. She threw herself into her work, keeping busy with Emma and finding excuses to stay out of the house. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the memory of the night before. The guilt was suffocating, but so was the lingering ache in her chest, the part of her that had wanted more. It wasn't until the end of the week that Daniel finally cornered her. Emma had gone to bed, and Eleanor was working late in her home office. Sophia was in the living room folding laundry when Daniel came in and closed the door behind him. "Sophia, we need to talk," he said, his voice firm but quiet. She didn't look up. "There's nothing to talk about." "Yes, there is," he insisted, moving closer. "You've been avoiding me all week." "I've been busy," she said, her voice trembling. "Sophia, please," he said, his tone softening. "You can't pretend like nothing happened." She slammed the laundry basket down on the table and stood, finally meeting his eyes. "What do you want me to say, Daniel? That I regret it? That I hate myself for what we did? Because I do." His face fell, and for a moment, he looked as though she'd slapped him. "Do you really?" "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Maybe it was a mistake, but it wasn't just some meaningless thing. Don't tell me you didn't feel something, Sophia." She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Of course, she had felt something. She had felt everything. But that didn't make it right. "It doesn't matter what I felt," she said finally. "What matters is that it was wrong. We both know that." He stepped around the coffee table, closing the distance between them. "I know it was wrong," he said, his voice low. "But I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop wanting you." "Stop," she said, backing away. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "It's the truth," he said, his eyes locked on hers. "I care about you, Sophia. More than I should. And I think you feel the same way." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Please, don't do this. Please, don't make this harder than it already is." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Sophia, I can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't keep pretending like everything is okay. I can't stay here." That night, Sophia sat alone in her room, staring at the small suitcase in the corner. She had come to this country for a better life, for a chance to support her family back home. This job had been a blessing, an opportunity she couldn't afford to lose. But now, it felt like a trap, a constant reminder of her mistake, of the line she had crossed and could never uncross. By the time the sun rose, she had made up her mind. She couldn't stay. It wasn't fair to Eleanor, to Emma, or even to herself. She needed to leave, to start over somewhere far away from the Reynolds and the weight of her mistakes. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Emma. The little girl didn't understand why Sophia was leaving, and it broke Sophia's heart to see her face crumple with sadness. "Why do you have to go, Sophia?" Emma asked, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. Sophia knelt down to her level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes, grown-ups have to make hard choices, sweetie. But I'll always remember you, okay? You'll always be my special girl." "Will I see you again?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. "I hope so," Sophia said honestly. "But even if I don't, I want you to know how much I love you." Emma threw her arms around Sophia's neck, and Sophia held her tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Leaving her was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but she knew it was the right choice. As the taxi pulled away from the Reynolds home, Sophia couldn't help but look back at the house on Maplewood Lane. It was a beautiful house, full of love and laughter, but also secrets and regrets. She knew she would never forget it, or the family she had left behind. The weight of her secret would stay with her forever, a reminder of the choices she had made and the lives she had touched. But as she drove away, Sophia felt a glimmer of hope. She had made a mistake, but she had also found the strength to walk away. And sometimes, that's the hardest part of all,